Hello my artsy friends! Today we're going to be adding some fresh cut florals to a casual canvas clutch. So let's start stitching. So we're starting with our water soluble stabilizer. I'm going to peel that and then I'm going to stick that right in the center of my bag. You can choose to put this wherever you like. We're going to start with our stems. So I'm going to be using a back stitch for all of these. So I'm starting with my straight stitch up through the back, down through the front, and then I'm going to continue that by going up a stitch length ahead and then coming back down into the last hole of my initial stitch. So again, these are all in the 101 class. We also covered them in our stitches. So I'm going to go through these a little more quickly. So we're doing back stitches for all of these offshoots. So we're going to kind of start from the outside and work our way in. So for this one specifically, I'm going to be doing the back stitch all the way up. This is also called a fern stitch when you see it kind of with the offshoots here. You can just complete this with a back stitch and leave it as is. I'm going to come back through and add a few little French knots. So feel free, again, you can leave it plain or you can add a French knot here. So we're coming up through the back, wrapping it 2 times, and then going right back down next to where we came out. And so I'm doing little buds here. You can add color. I'm just doing some little white buds. Feel free to make this as unique as you like. Be sure you're using the colors that you prefer. I'm going to finish this up and we'll move on to our next stem. So for this one, I have it laid out as a lazy daisy. So again, I'm going to finish the stem with back stitches, and then these little offshoots, these little loops are meant for lazy daisies, which is what I'm going to put in here. Now that being said, you can feel free to fill this in if you want to make it feel more like flowers, maybe a lilac or something like that. Feel free to make it yours. So I'm going to come back through after I finish this back stitch. And I'm going to come up and make that loop for the lazy daisy, come right back down, and then I'm going to catch that loop at the very top. So I've got my loop, and then I'm going to pull this through and use my needle to catch this as I'm pulling the thread through. So as I catch that loop, I'm just going to tighten it and come right over top to secure it. And that is the lazy daisy. So I'm going to do that for a few of those. I'm also going to be mixing in colors. So again, make sure that you're choosing the colors that you like. I have a lot of beige in here, some white, some neutral tones. I'm going to add in a green stem as well. And then I'll be working into some darker colors. So for this one, same thing. It's going to be the lazy daisy. I'm using a lighter green. And you've seen this throughout the class. I'm using light green and dark green along with some neutrals and then pops of pink and purple. So again, feel free to mix the colors up how you like, and I am using 2 to 3 strands of the floss, so keep that in mind too. The thicker you want it to look, the more floss you'll use, and the more dainty you want it to look, less that you'll use. You can also play with it. I made sure that my stems and things were 2 to 3, and then my flowers I can bulk up to 3 or 4 if I really want to make that pop in the middle. So now that I have my lazy daisies in, I'm going to go up here and just finish these. This is just a quick back stitch. I switched to a darker green and I'm going to fill these in, and then I'm going to go over, there are a few little vines with leaves. Now I've been doing some 2-tone leaves, but for these smaller ones, I'm going to do the leaf stitch. So we're going to come up here after we finish those back stitches and create our leaf stitch. So I'm coming up through the back at the top and going about 3/4 of the way down. And then I'm going to be switching sides. So I'm going to alternate sides. I'm going to come up on the right side here. And then I'm going to make sure I cross over that center line to create that vein for the leaf. And I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. I'm going to come up through the back and then cross over the center. Now, all I do is follow the outline for this and work my way down, crossing over back and forth to make sure that I create that vein. Again, this is the leaf stitch if you need to refer back to any of the stitches. I'm going to speed this up to fill it in, and then I'll be meeting you back to start some of our florals. So these are all going to be satin stitches for the petals, so we'll work through this pretty quickly. I like to plot out my guidelines, so I'll do it in a couple spots and then I kind of fill it in so that my stitches are more even. If I go side by side by side, I tend to get a little wonky. Feel free to do whatever works for you. And then in the centerpiece, I am going to add a French knot. Again, this could be a satin stitch. Feel free to mix it up. Coming up, wrapping it 2 to 3 times, and then pulling it right back down. And so I've got that nice little center for my purple flower. Now for these more star-shaped flowers, I'm going to be using a yellow. Again, feel free to mix up your colors, and I'm going to be doing the same thing where I'm splitting my petal and then I'm filling in with a satin stitch. So that's up through the back, down through the front, side by side by side. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this one up. We'll fill in and then we'll come back for that centerpiece. Again, I really love the French knot, but feel free to fill that in however you like. It could just be another satin stitch, or if you want to try the French knot, go for it. I am using the full floss for the French knot. So I wanted this to be pretty bulky, so I am using the full floss and wrapping it 2 or 3 times. I'm pulling that through and all done. So I'll finish up the yellow ones and meet you back for the daisies. So here we're going to be filling in the daisies. This one I'm not as concerned with splitting the petals because they're pretty close together, but also daisies in general have a little more, I don't know, they're a little more unruly. They're a little more wild. I'm going to go ahead and fill these in, and then again, I'll be using French knots for the center. I'm going to come up through the back, wrap it 2 or 3 times, and come right back down. So again, I'm just filling this whole center space in with French knots and giving it a little more texture. So I'll speed this up and meet you back for the leaves. So again, we're still working our way from the outside in. Since I have the daisies done, I'm going to be going into these larger leaves. Now I'm going to be using a satin stitch for this. You could do a leaf stitch, you could do a long and short. Feel free to mix that up however you like. I'm going to be coming in at an angle with a satin stitch, and for this one, I am definitely going to put in my guidelines to help keep my stitches a little more organized. Now I'm going to fill this in with a lighter green on top and then come back with a darker green. So I've got that filled in, and I'm going to come back with the dark green and doing the opposite. So I'm coming at that angle to help with the vein and make that look more like the separation of the leaf. Now I did add a couple little accent stitches, like little straight stitches to blend the light green with the dark green. You don't have to do that. In hindsight, I kind of wish I hadn't, but you'll see that later when we get started on our flowers. So there, you can kind of see those little tick marks. It's growing on me, but feel free to add any kind of accents that you like. And now we're going to finish up with our 2 focal leaves. So I'm going to do satin stitches again. And because these are such large petals, I am going to really make sure that I set my guidelines and then fill it in side by side by side with the satin stitch. So I'm going to do that for all of the petals and then come back in the center. I'm also going to do a satin stitch in the center and then outline that with French knots. So again, I'm using the full floss coming up through the back, wrapping it a couple times and then going right back down. But that's going to help give a little more texture and break up all of the satin stitches here in the center. So I'm going to outline that one and then come back for that very last flower. And now we're on our last flower. So I'm going to do a slightly lighter color here. So I did a little bit darker, basically the same hue. It's a purple that I have in the back, and then I'm doing slightly lighter in the same family here in the front. Feel free to mix this up how you like, but I kind of like the idea of playing with shadows and having this one more forward. So I'm going to fill that in with satin stitches. I have the center with satin stitches, and again, I'm just outlining this little border here with French knots. Again, using the full floss to give that a little more texture, a little more bulk. And now it's time to wash off our water-soluble stabilizer. Now this one gave me a little bit of trouble. It stuck pretty well to the canvas, so I did end up soaking this one, and I just soaked it face down. So I get started with the sprayer, and then I move over and just let that soak. And here's our final piece. I love it. I can't wait to see yours.
Key takeaways. Use the colors and stitches that best reflect your style. To avoid dark lines, be sure to dissolve the water-soluble stabilizer completely. This may mean soaking it overnight. If your bag is washable, be sure to do that first so your fabric doesn't shrink on you and ruin your stitches. And remember to upcycle when possible. This is also a hack because if it's upcycled, it's probably already been washed. Happy stitching! I'll see you in the next lesson.